Hello and welcome to Retech, and this is just a roundup of what's been going on in the last few weeks, and also what changes we're doing with the channel itself, and also a little bit more on the A500 Mini. Now, this has been a very divisive machine. It's more divisive than I actually thought it would be. Basically because we've had a lot of comments and a lot of emails and a lot of feedback concerning the A500, and also if you look at other channels as well who've reviewed this machine, the comments are fairly consistent. Now, I don't normally do this kind of thing, but this is kind of been a massively divisive machine, and it's something that really we need to kind of try and cover if we can. So that's where this is, and also we're going to go down the route of letting you know what changes are to the channel. And there's also another video coming up, and it's basically to try and find out if there's a will from the community for others of these kind of machines, whether or not they're full size or not. So let's dive in. The first really thing I'm going to talk about is the A500, the Mini. The Mini's been very, very different in the way it's been received to the Commodore 64 Mini. The Commodore 64 Mini was a very well received product. It got very good reviews. It wasn't perfect. I'm not so sure if it was ever meant to be perfect, but it got good reviews, good feedback from everybody who actually had a go of it and used it or bought it or wanted to buy it or watch videos about it. And it was very, very different to the way this one has. We've got a bit of a split, and I'll go through those splits now. First thing is that it's expensive. For what it is, it's expensive. That seems to be one of the consensus, because it's more in cost than the original sort of Commodore 64 Max version. You see, the original Commodore 64 Mini was kind of around about sort of the 80, depending where you got it, down to the £50 mark. So there was quite a bit of a range in prices. Now, the average is probably £59 ish, but it was kind of discounted in a lot of places, and it gave people more of a kind of a will to go out and buy it as an impulse. Now, this one being the price it is, it's less of an impulse buy. It's quite expensive, even as we mentioned before, and other people have mentioned before, such as David Murray from the 8-Bit Guy. It's going to be even slightly more expensive probably in the USA, and that's not a brilliant standpoint, because what they've done is they've upped the price from the Commodore 64 Mini. I know it's slightly more powerful, and I know it's probably slightly more capable in a way, but to be honest, the Commodore 64 Mini, or the 64 Mini, had various processors and various memory in the machine itself, so it wasn't a kind of a fixed thing. It was more of the lines of where Sinclair used to use 64K memory chips in his machine because they were available, but you only had 48K to use, and it was very similar to what this has happened to be due to supply and demand, and the 64 as well, rather, due to supply and demand came to be. But it is rather expensive. It is, if you look at it in terms of relating it to a 64 Mini, but if you relate it to a Raspberry Pi, the 400, then not so much. They're on kind of the same level pegging kind of playing field, although the Pi is probably much more capable, and the Pi has, in a way, a lot more going for it in the terms that you can use Raspberry and Linux and so on it, and really use it as a mini desktop, where this one not so much. As it stands, you can't use it as an Amiga A500 using Workbench. And so we're going to cover some of the comments. Now, one of the comments was that until they bring a large version, a big version, they're not going to buy it because they see it as a toy, a games machine, something, you know, that you can just plug in and have a few games on, which is, yes, this is what this is. It's not a more serious machine. It's not a machine to replace your Amiga with, and it's not a machine that's going to set the world on fire. And I agree with that. I would have rather they came out with a maxi or a full-size version than this one. Whether it was the Amiga 600, 1200, 500 and so on, really I'm not so sure if, you know, that was the biggest killer of it. I think basically if they came out with a 1200, people would be happy. If they came out with a 500, people would be very happy. If they came out with a 600 version, I don't think so many people would have been happy, but the kind of die-hard Amiga enthusiasts would have accepted it and been quite happy that they had a recreated machine they could just use for everyday kind of gaming, messing about, testing, demos, all that kind of thing. And I think that would have found its foothold anyway. The other comments were that they've shot themselves in the foot because of it, because, you know, if most people go out and buy one of these, we'll stick a keyboard on it, we'll have upgraded it or basically homebrewed it to get to where they really wanted it to be. And I agree with that, because I would do the same. And that would have been something that may have put me off buying a full-size version if I'd spent the time and effort into making this into something that I wanted to use a lot. So yeah, that's a fair comment. The other comments centered around the carousel. People wanted to be able to just load their own games onto the carousel instead of using the flash drive option in the menus, which is WHD load, which has been around for a while and has been around in the kind of the Pi community for a long time. So that's nothing new. That doesn't step things up or move things forward. I agree with that as well. What I kind of disagree with is the kind of the slight, not really hate, but the negative feedback about this machine. I mean, this machine has taken a little bit to develop. This machine's taken a little bit to get right to this form, to make it look as good as it has. This machine's had a lot of effort into the carousel and also the way it works, how slick it is and so on. And I can see that it's kind of getting the remarks where the PlayStation Classic got, where it was very well executed, looked the part, felt the part, ran the part, but you know, it was kind of on a carousel version. There's similar lines to this where you had the games and the games is what it came with. I think people are missing the point a little bit. I think people are missing the point in a way that they really, how can I formulate in a point that the machine is the machine. Okay, a few years ago you would buy a games console and you'd be given a starter game and you'd be happy with that. You'd go out and buy some, so you'd have one game, you go out and buy some more. You'd actually buy an Xbox with nothing, just the bare Xbox. You'd buy a PlayStation as the bare PlayStation, and so on and so forth. And you know, that's been all the way down the line. If you wanted to buy, you know, a bigger pack with a few games in it, well, that was your choice, that was your option. Now, the sheer fact that this and the PlayStation Classic and the 64 Mini came with a bundle of games is a good thing. It gets the machine useful out of the box and usable. And you know, I think people are losing sight of that a little bit, because at the end of the day, if you bought a Commodore 500, you would get bundled a few games. You would get bundled maybe a paint package and so on, or a few educational games as well in it. And you know, there'd be the aspirational side of it, you know. So that's where you know, this really is trying to emulate. It's emulating David Pleasant's bundles that he did when the Amiga 500 was current. So really, there's always going to be the detractors, the knockers, the cynics, and so on. Now, I believe that it's a good machine. It's not a bad recreation. It looks the part, it feels the part, it kind of does what, you know, a lot of Amiga gamers would want. And the fact that you've got to use a USB key to install your own games off WHD load isn't a big killer. It's using what you would do virtually if you bought your own floppy disk games of the time. You'd pop the floppy in, use them and run them. It was no hardship, and it's still not a hardship to run games off of a USB key, which is effectively a hard drive. So yeah, I don't think this Amiga 500 is a bust. I don't think it's something that people should knock unduly, and I don't think it's a bad machine. It's a good machine, as I said before. Now, so we're going to cover a few more comments. Another one was my bit of tongue-in-cheek kind of side, or my tongue-in-cheek playfulness against the reviewers for this machine. And as I think I said in my review of this machine, I'm not going down that route. I'm not going to do the, ooh, isn't this cute, isn't this a nice machine, doesn't it look great, doesn't it have, you know, the look of an Amiga, and you know, isn't the music nice, and you know, all of this kind of thing. Isn't the tank mouse great, isn't the controller brilliant? Because, you know, they have the shortcomings. As a games console, the mouse is a good thing, and it's nice that they've done it in the style of the original Amiga. And I know by the look of it, and the way it's constructed, it's, you know, just really a standard optical mouse with a case on it, which is fine, which is good. That's what most mice are. The controller is a controller that, as I said, is a bit creaky, is reasonably well put together. It's quite robust in its casing and its feel. Not so sure about the buttons, which I said before, but that's not the point. This is a low cost games machine. It's still relatively low cost. And you know, the kind of rose tinted glasses effect for the machine, well, yeah, you know, fine. If that's what kind of you're into, that's brilliant. If you want something to play once and put on the shelf, fantastic. Puts more money in retro games' pocket because you ordered one and bought one. They have to be used, really, to find out what the flaws are, what their problems are, what their issues are, what their good bits are. And this is where I come from. This has been hammered by my little ones in the, you know, the days that I've had it, and to be honest, it's all right. It's stood up, and I've got a feeling it will stand up, and I think the mouse will stand up. The buttons may not stand up, but then again, you know, how many game controllers really do stand up to the ham-fistedness of youth? So yeah, it's just one of those things. But the gushing, it's not me. The kind of oohs and ahs, not me. You know, you're supposed to be reviewing it, not trying to sell the console. If you wanted to sell it, then fine. Put on your bottom of your, you know, your video that you're promoting this console. I'm not. I wouldn't really want to, because at the end of the day, people will buy it because of what it is, and that's a good thing. That's a brilliant thing. And retro games just about has these minis to a T. I doubt there was any other companies that would have produced these minis with this attention to detail, which is a good thing. Now, there's been criticism of this, and as I said in my video, yeah, I like the controller. I think it's good. I think it's fairly well built. It's constructed reasonably well. It's got its shortcomings, but doesn't every controller? But it's not the thing for one of these. Really, for an Amiga, most people used a joystick. Most people had multiple joysticks, quick shot and whatever joysticks that they used. Most games were written and designed to be used around a joystick, not a gamepad. These are a later addition. These are the CD32 territory and beyond, really, for the Amiga range. So I can see why people criticise the controller, and a lot of them said use the joystick out of the 64. Yeah, fine, that's great. I mean, that's what I do. That's what I prefer to use. It's not brilliant though, not for the carousel games, because the carousel games were optimized around this joystick, so this gamepad. So yeah, on your own games, WHT load, stick your own games on a memory card, use your own joystick, brilliant. Okay, work it around to the way you want it. Now, I've never really had so much involvement in a product of this kind, or had so many comments coming this way about the product of this kind. It's usually, yeah, great, you know, all that kind of thing. It's a nice video, or I agree with what you said, or I disagree with what you said, which is fine, which is what you're supposed to do. But it's a split. This machine's kind of split a lot of people's opinion. I'm kind of hoping that it's going to sell enough for retro games to produce the case for the keyboard for this. You know, shove the internals into it, maybe upgrade the firmware a little bit so the carousel is adaptable. Might be the easiest way of doing it. One of the biggest comments was, I've got to constantly mess about with the settings on this machine to make the games run the way I want them to run, and completely agree with that. Some of the games run way too quick. Some of the games are not quite right with the standard settings. Some of the games need to be tweaked, and yeah, that's a fair comment. It's a fair point. So this, as I said before, the Amiga, right, as a mini, as a mini platform, really shouldn't be viewed as an out-and-out games machine. If they wanted to do an out-and-out games machine, which is what they've tried to do and done it reasonably well, then it should have been optimized for one thing only, one platform only, the A500, because it's in an A500 shell. It should have been optimized to run A500 games, A500 products, A500 everything. So when you got it, you'd have all A500 versions of the games on, including Zoo, and you would be able to use it as an A500 machine, which means you could have put your workbench on there, you'd stick a memory key in with all your A500 games on that you wanted to run, etc., and that would have been perfect. They've tried a little too hard to please everybody, and that's the biggest mistake with the A500 or any Amiga sort of emulation recreation platform. Now, if they'd say this was an A500 and it will run A500 games only and it will do everything the A500 did, brilliant, fantastic, lock it down to being an A500 only. Now, that would have made more sense for casual buyers who wanted a games console and maybe stick their own A500 games in. So optimizing it for a platform would have been better. It would have got less issues and less people complaining about the speed difference, the configurations that you may or may not have to do on some of the games. Personally, I've ran them as they are and they've been cool, they've been alright. I mean, because I haven't played the games for a while that are on here, I didn't really notice the speed difference, you know, if there was any, and I don't think a lot of people would. You got to be kind of an Amiga file and somebody who's played on a genuine hardware, on a genuine piece of Amiga 500 classic hardware, to really notice the difference. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Brilliant. It's great. It's great that people notice these things, because, you know, we have to be able to improve the breed, and this can be improved, and this isn't a machine that is stuck as it is out of the box because of the use of WHD load. Now, if Retro Games brought out the A500 as an A500 only, not configurable to anything else, and then brought out an A1200 version not configurable to anything else than an A1200, so it ran all of the A1200 software, that'd be brilliant. But it's going to add to cost for people. I understand why they've kind of tried to build in a little bit more usefulness in the platform, and I got the same on my conversion. My version I did, I can do the same, but I predominantly leave it as an A500. You know, if I want to run it as an A1200, I'll switch it up and use it as an A1200 or A1000 and so on. But predominantly, because it was built as an A500 replica, then it's an A500. And, you know, I quite like that, because I can use it out of the box, or my own machine is an A500. And it uses WHD load, and it uses everything else this does from the workbench, which is nice. So yeah, I kind of agree with what people have been saying, which is nice. I really enjoy the fact that people have gone out of their way to recreate machines that should have been long, you know, forgotten about, long since dead and buried by now. And the fact that they aren't is a testament to the original hardware, and more importantly to the original software. Now, as far as recreations go, this is actually, in my opinion, one of the nicer recreations. Okay, you can get a Pi and you can emulate it through a Pi, and you can use WHD load and so on, but out of the box, plugging it in, playing on it, this is ideal. This is fantastic. And I completely agree with everybody else who thinks it's a great nostalgia kick, and it's brilliant. I really agree with that. And the tongue-in-cheekness of my videos was because, as I said, simply because it was a bit of fun. And also, you know, I'm sure, you know, in the future, the 8-bit guy will hear himself back saying, "This is so cute," and so on, and go, "Oh, did I really say that?" Yeah, we've all said things that we shouldn't have, and we've all said things in the spirit of the moment, and it's good. But when you've got 5 or 6 different reviewers all going, "Isn't this so cute?" I think some of them missed the point. They missed the point. This is a games machine, and it's a games machine purely and simply because of the way it's constructed and the way it's designed on its really easy to use and very nice carousel. I've had mostly positive comments about the videos that I've done on these. I'm sure this one people are now going to go, "Oh no, not another A500 Mini video," and no, it's not. This is you guys. This is what you guys have said. And I think that you've all got a very valid point. Just flicking through to my comments now on this, because part of my other comments and videos were, I've loved the interaction with people about this. It really has caused a little bit of a stir. And it's been a long time since something has caused a bit of a stir in the community. And don't get down on this machine, because I think it's very well done. I think if you really wanted an A500 to play games on and to put your own games on, you couldn't really go wrong with this. As I said, the price isn't that bad in comparison to a P or Pi 400. It isn't that bad in comparison to building your own with a Raspberry Pi kit and so on, or just how much money have you spent on your PC just to emulate an Amiga. You know, that's what you got to kind of picture at and think about it at. I do agree. It's a bit pricey, as I said, but you know, at the end of the day, things are going up anyway because of national and worldwide chip shortages and so on. You see, we've got a gentleman called Paul, or Brian Paul here. He said he thinks people are overestimating the cost of fabricating a 500 as a large scale model like the Maxi, and I actually agree with him. It doesn't cost a lot to blow these plastics. As I said, they're not prestige quality plastics. They're good enough, but they're not the top of the range or top of the line plastics. And I agree that blowing a case the size of the A500 isn't going to be the most expensive part of the deal. The keyboard as well, because an A500, roughly, if you look at it, looks very similar to a modern USB PC keyboard. It's laid out very, very similarly. It wouldn't take a lot to have that remapped and have the keys that are not used removed from it and remapped and put in an A500 case. Wouldn't cost a lot. There's a couple of UK countries that build them to order. They did it for the recreated ZX Spectrum. It was awful. It was a nice design. I mean, it was beautiful to look at. It was very well done, but the inception of it wasn't very good. But the actual case keyboard was done by a UK company not too far from where I am now, so it's something that is more than possible, and it's not that expensive to do. So yeah, I agree that, you know, you can't really say that it would be too expensive to manufacture a case and a keyboard for one of these. Yeah, we'll put the price up though. We've got another one from here which basically said, I've been, you know, had an Amiga 1200, it died, and since then he would, you know, like something to run his Amiga 500 or Amiga 1200 500 games on, but the fact that you can't use it on the carousel with your own stuff is a bit of a downer, which, you know, I understand. It's something that we, you know, could be corrected, and I'm sure it will be very, very shortly. You know, and the other one is from Jan. It said the gamepad is actually better than the original CD32. Yes, it is. It is. It's much better to hold and to feel. Oh, and it feels much better to use in his experience. So yeah, it does, and I completely agree with that, because I never really liked the CD32 gamepad. It always felt a bit bleh. And he also says that he's prepared to pay extra for the basically unneeded plastic for the case of an A500, etc., which I completely agree. Or an A1200, I agree. Most people want that Amiga experience when they do one of these. You know, we've got another comment saying that the joystick is a better option, which I've touched on. Yeah, I do believe that is the case for a lot of the Amiga games. But everyone agrees that the gamepad is generally better than the CD32 one, and I've used the CD32 gamepad and I kind of agree with it. As I said, the game buttons aren't so good, but you know, time will tell. Hopefully it'll prove me wrong, which is what I really would like it to do. So yeah, I mean, it isn't overall a bad system. And then we got onto some of the other comments. One of the comments, do I think the Amiga 500 machine is kind of the right machine to give the Mini treatment? I don't really think the A500 Mini is the right machine to be given the Mini treatment. It should have gone straight to full-size version, unless you just want something to play games on. As a games machine, games console, it's great, it's good, it's decent enough, it works, and it does everything that it says on the box. Okay, but I would have thought that the A500 would have been a machine that went straight to a large version, because they've, I think, as I've said before, I think they've kind of misjudged the mood on this, the community on this. I think it will sell and it will hopefully reach its targets, but most people who've got one of these are waiting for the full-size one, and most people who haven't bought one of these are waiting for the full-size one. Yeah, another guy, Jan, he's basically torn between getting one of these or building one, an emulated one himself, Raspberry Pi. He's already has an Amiga forever, and I guess the price of either option is pretty much similar, which I agree with, which it is, because they are pretty much on par. It's whether you want to spend that time optimizing your own or getting something out of the box and using it straight away. That's a personal choice. You know, I like to optimize my own, but I also like, just like most people who get a bit lazy at times, just pull it out and play with it. Just, you know, chuck it on the bench, put it in front of a screen, have an hour with it, go and do something else, which is, this is ideal for. People forget this is a games console, it's ideal for that. Another one, the carousel menu on 64 and this, the comments are that it doesn't feel natural looking at it on these machines. Well, it kind of doesn't. The full-size 64, it really doesn't feel a natural thing. You boot, you know, you let it boot into Commodore 64 mode and it's completely natural, it's brilliant. But on the Mini, it kind of works, because you know it's not a real machine. On the 64 or this, you know it's a games machine, it's a retro machine, it's a nostalgic kick machine. So yeah, it sort of works on this, but if they did a full-size version, please have the workbench option on it, which is what seems to be coming out. The other one's thanks for the video. It's a pragmatic view, it's a common sense view. Well, thanks for that, Eric. And it's a review from a European point of view. Yeah, well, most of my reviews are kind of from a European point of view, because that's predominantly where I, you know, grew up, knew these machines and so on. You know, with traveling, I've got a little bit of a different side of it, and I can see both sides of the coin. But generally, as I kind of have said, the Amiga, the Atari ST, were predominantly kind of a European fare. They didn't do as well in the United States as they did in Europe. They didn't do as well in the United States as they did in Europe. But that's just how it was. Both divisions of Commodore worked in very separate ways. You had the UK and the European side of it, which promoted the machine as an aspirational machine, so something that you could either educate yourself on or play lots of games on and entertain yourself. The American side of it was very different. Started off as a serious machine and they tried to work it up from there. So yeah, two different sides of the coin. I mean, I liked the Amiga as a serious machine. I liked what it could do. I liked the Amiga as a desktop publisher and all that kind of stuff, and a music and graphics making machine. But it also had a place as an entertainment machine, so it was kind of an all-rounder. Retro Rewind said, totally agree with what you say. All the reviews are not addressing any of the issues with the A500 Mini. Yeah, they're not. They're doing the retro head kind of review, which is great. It's brilliant. I mean, if I hadn't, you know, seen any of those videos or heard people talk about the A500 for a long time. I would have maybe done a video going, oh, isn't it nice? Doesn't it look great? Isn't it really, really well presented? Which it is. All of that is true. There's not one person who's kind of invented stuff about this machine, but you need it from the flip side of the coin, which is hopefully where I came from. Another one, Ken Knight said no working keyboard. If they tried, they'd probably have something functional and work like buttons on a phone. Yeah, they could have. I mean, you know, Clive Sinclair was doing membrane keyboards for pennies, and you can still buy them for pennies. You know, a small keyboard, you know, would have probably been nice, so you could actually use it as a games console on the games, so you didn't have to use that virtual keyboard thing. Regardless of how small it is, it's easy to type F1 space, your name in, and so on. On something like this, he has a point. It's a nice point. Maybe it's something somebody's going to do down the line, which would be a good thing if somebody brings out a keyboard to replace this thing and make it a calculator style keyboard or a push button phone type keyboard or something similar. That would be brilliant. That would be actually a good thing to do. It would make this a bit of a more useful machine even for games. Yeah, because he says in the real world of gamers you do need to hit function keys or space and so on, and he's not quite sure which market they're targeting with this. Yeah, as I said, if it was an A500 games machine, then that would have been the gamers market targeted for those kind of games. If it was an A500 machine that could be used for everything, well, this really isn't the machine. If it was a retro nostalgic games machine, yeah, they're kind of hitting the mark with that. But then why suffer the, you know, the kind of having to alternate and adapt and to change settings to get some of the games to run right? Why didn't they just optimize it around the 500 and go, there's all the games? Because predominantly the 500 had more games than any other part of the platform. There's not, you know, there's no lack of games that they could have put on here. So yeah, I kind of see where he's coming from. And Calculans 1712 said retro games have said that 500 maxis will only happen if it's financially feasible. As I said, it won't be a full-size 500. It would be too costly and end up looking more like an A600. Now that's the other comments I've actually got and heard and spoke about. Financially feasible. Now if they'd launched this off the mark as a full-size model for maybe £15-20 more, $20, $25 more than what they're marketing this at, that would have sold. They didn't need the carousel filled up with games that they're paying royalties to. That could have gone. They could have just paid a royalty for Workbench. That could have been put on here. Everybody else could have then had a full-size Amiga that they could use and customize out of the box the way they did their normal Amiga back in the day when you got it delivered and you opened it up and you ran some of the games you bought and you played with Workbench, found out what it could do, and then customized it to the way you wanted it, adding a hard drive or whatever you did with your Amiga back in the day. I predominantly did, you know, things like Lightwave and Imagine and all that kind of thing on mine, so you can't do that on this. So yeah, if it was a financial reason rather than squeezing money out of the platform, then the A500 should have been a full-size model off the bat, day one, no questions. It should have been a full-size model for people to buy, take home and use as an Amiga 500. They would have got the sales. I mean, you know, it's not £100 or $100 to get a case blown, as in each case en masse on a production line. You know, it isn't £100 or $100 to have a USB keyboard to look like an A500 keyboard. It's just not. you know, so this could have been done very differently, but it's still slightly too expensive on a shelf in a supermarket or a Walmart or a GameStop or a game store or any other store, PC World, Curry's, whatever it is, for this to be an impulse buy. You know, most people would impulse buy something up to maybe I don't know, let's say $100, you know, £80 mark, somewhere around that. Once it approaches the $110, $115, $120, $130 mark, it's no longer an impulse buy. Same as in the UK or Europe, when it gets around the 130, 140, 150 euro mark or £110 mark, you're looking at something that's not really an impulse buy. It's not like, you know, buy, oh, I fancy that pair of jeans or whatever, or, you know, t-shirt or something that's relatively low in value. That's an impulse buy. So yeah, it's one of those things, and I agree here. The A500 might be a bit more costly as a full-size version, but not to the detriment of people who went out and bought one of these and then decided, you know what, I need a keyboard, I need it to do more. When's the maxi version coming out? So yeah, I agree with that. So these are the comments, some of the comments that I've had. Yeah, we've had a few saying exactly the same, even on my other videos. It all depends on the sales of the maxi, whether or not they're going to bring out a 500 full-size one. Calculin also said that basically retro games are saying that if they don't bring out the maxi version, people should buy the mini and customize it to the way they want it, so they don't miss out. Well, really, I mean, this is paraphrasing. Yeah, people should buy the mini just to support it. Well, that's not really the way things are done. And we got another one from Tales of Juddland Wastes. The proof will be in the sales figures. You know, if you want to produce and market what you think the average retro fan on the street will buy instead, well, go ahead, but that's not the point, because the first part of that, the proof will be in the sales figures. Well, I know currently they must have sold about 30,000 of these units by now. Okay, I reckon they're going to head towards 50,000 very shortly, and I also think that that's not going to be enough for retro games to produce a full-size version. I think it's going to have to hit 100,000 units sold before they ever think about doing that. Because with their comments of people should buy the mini and support the mini, well, why support? That's another comment I don't quite understand, right? Why support the mini? Because the mini runs stuff for WHD load predominantly. Okay. They can only support the mini by buying it originally from Retro Games. Retro Games hasn't put out a lot of support for any of its models, really. So, you know, how are you going to support something that they don't proactively support over the years? So that might be a bit of a tricky one. Support for the A500 of the Mini is only as good as what's out there for the original Amiga platform. So, for example, LDA files, WHD load through that can run just about what a genuine Amiga can run. And that would be the same for the Maxi, the big version, the full-size version of the A5, 600 or 1200, whichever route they go down. The only way you're going to get support for this is to make sure that support for the genuine Amigas doesn't start going downhill. And that's only going to happen if the original Amigas start failing and dying in, you know, because they're getting old. capacitors and chips and processors and ICs are going to fail. That's just a given. That's just how it's going to be, and we're going to have bit rot on a lot of their, you know, their floppy disks and so on. So that's going to happen. So the Amiga support, they have to rely on the community of the Amigas and the retro collectors and the classic gamers for support, to support them to buy the A500 Mini, to buy the A500 Maxi. Now, if they brought out an A500 Maxi where gamers and retro collectors and retro Amiga fans can use as an everyday Amiga and keep their precious aging Amigas in better condition, a lot of people will buy a full-size version. They're missing the point. They'd buy a full-size version as an everyday hack, an everyday machine. I think retro games is getting ahead of themselves now. They've had success with the 64 Mini, the 64 Maxi. They think they're going to get success by doing the same formula, by bringing out a Mini and then making people buy the Maxi, because they're putting out press releases that they would only release a Maxi if enough of these are sold. That's like saying, buy it or you don't get the Amiga you actually want. Yeah, it's a bit weird, but there you go. But anyway, these are the comments. These are my take on things. It's not something I normally do, because, and the reason I've done this is because of the abundance of questions and comments and different opinions on this machine. I have never seen so many different opinions on one little machine. You know, the consensus is they want a big one, they want a full-size version. So retro games, come on, bring out a full-size version before somebody brings it out before you, or before somebody brings out an Atari ST full-size machine straight off the bat that people can use for their retro collecting and also for their retro games and software and programs and demos and so on. Because if somebody does that, they'll beat you to the punchline, and it would be hard for you to come back from that. It's not an exclusive thing that only you can do. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I thought I'd better do this because we need really to put a close on this, and the closure is that people want, or still want, or wanted the full-size version. The A500 Mini is not effectively what people want. They want the bigger full-size version. You know, the Mini's a great toy, it's a great nostalgia piece, but yeah, that's what it is. It's a good games console. So let's hope retro games bring out a full-size version. Let's hope they do. So just before we go, I've slightly rebranded the channel just a little bit. I've just now called it Retech. It won't affect anything, it'll still be the search engine, everything's the same. There's a new banner on there and so on, and going forward just going to call it Retech because it's easier to search for as well. But basically the channel won't change, it won't be any different, and hopefully it'll stay as the Common Sense Retro channel really. I've never done one of these your comments bits before, and I'd never done one of the sort of slightly podcasty style ones as I've done previous to the review for the A500. And you know, if you like them, let me know. I quite enjoy them. It's great to interact with people. I'm gonna try and do these a little bit more often. I know I tend to try and put things out once a week. I do a lot of videos, but they were never aimed as mass market appeal videos. They were aimed as, originally, as I said, for my little one to learn about these things. But it's snowballing, and there's still a lot out there. There's still a lot more I can cover, and there's still a lot more that needs to be covered. And I hope you like this, and I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you stick with us. So Look for Retech from now on, probably easy to search for. And I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks a lot. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for sticking with us through this video. I'm not going to do another one on the A500 unless I'm really asked to do one. I do have a modification video come up based around basically the Amiga as is, the Amiga emulated machine that I've done, but then we're back on the track with the 8-bit machines after that, and we're back on track with more reviews of hardware, software and things that make these machines useful, because they still are useful. So thanks for watching, hope to see you soon. Thank you.